The year is 2025, and the hammer and sickle still flies over 1/6 of the Earth's surface. Moscow remains the capital of the largest nation ever known. The Soviet Union did not fall. It endured. It adapted. It survived the storm that was supposed to destroy it. And now, in this strange present, the world looks nothing like the one you know. There are no McDonald's in Red Square. There is no European Union as you understand it. America never became the sole superpower, and the internet you use every day never quite became the global network of freedom and commerce. Because in this timeline, history took a different turn on a winter day in 1991 when one man made a choice that changed everything. But to understand how the impossible became real, we must first remember what actually happened in our world. In the world, you know, the Soviet Union collapsed in December 1991. Mikhail Gorbachev resigned. The red flag came down from the Kremlin. 15 republics became 15 nations. The Cold War ended. America celebrated. The Eastern Bloc crumbled. Democracy seemed inevitable. Capitalism swept across the ruins of communism like a wave washing over sand. Within a decade, former Soviet states were joining NATO and the European Union. Russia became smaller, weaker, poorer. An entire superpower vanished almost overnight, and the world moved on convinced that liberal democracy had won forever. But what if it hadn't? What if the Soviet Union found a way to survive its darkest hour? The divergence point is December 8, 1991. In a hunting lodge deep in the Belovezhskaya forest, 3 men are meeting in secret. Boris Yeltsin of Russia, Leonid Kravchuk of Ukraine, Stanislav Shushkevich of Belarus. In our timeline, they signed the Belovezh Accords and declared the Soviet Union dissolved. But in this timeline, something different happens. Just before the signing, Gorbachev arrives unannounced. He has flown through a blizzard with a small security detail. His face is pale. His eyes are desperate. He knows this meeting will decide everything. He sits down across from Yeltsin and he does something he never did in our world. He offers a deal. Not resignation, not dissolution, but transformation. He proposes a new union, a voluntary federation, real sovereignty for the republics, but a shared military, shared currency, shared borders. He promises to step down not as the last leader of a dying state, but as the architect of its rebirth. He looks at Yeltsin, and he says one sentence that changes history. If we break apart now, we will all become servants of the West within a generation. Yeltsin hesitates. In our timeline, he would have laughed. But here in this frozen forest with the weight of history pressing down, he remembers something his grandmother told him long ago. A house divided against itself becomes firewood. He looks at Kravchuk, he looks at Shushkevich, and he nods. They do not dissolve the Union. They remake it. The new agreement is signed by midnight. It is called the Forest Accord. The Soviet Union becomes the Eurasian Federation. Each republic keeps its own government, but shares defense, trade, and infrastructure. Gorbachev steps down as promised. A council of presidents replaces the single Soviet leader. The Communist Party loses its monopoly, but it does not disappear. Instead, it splits into regional parties that compete in controlled elections. The KGB becomes the Federal Security Service, but keeps its power. The economy begins a slow shift toward managed markets, not the chaotic privatization that destroyed Russia in our timeline. The oligarchs never rise. The mafia never takes over. The state remains strong. By 1993, the Eurasian Federation is stable. It is not the old Soviet Union. It is something new, something quieter, something more dangerous. The 1990s unfolded in a world where 2 superpowers still exist, America and the Federation. NATO does not expand eastward because there is no collapse to exploit. The Baltic states remain inside the Federation under pressure. Ukraine stays. Belarus stays. Central Asia stays. The Caucasus stays. The Federation is weakened, but it is not broken. It modernizes slowly. It allows some private business. It opens some borders. But it never loses control. The military remains massive. The nuclear arsenal stays intact, and the West watches nervously as the giant they thought was dying begins to stand again. In Washington, there is confusion. In Brussels, there is fear. The Cold War did not end. it simply paused. By the year 2000, the world has adjusted to the new reality. The Eurasian Federation controls a single time zone spanning 11 zones. Its population is 290 million. Its economy is smaller than America's, but it is integrated and disciplined. There is no chaos, no bandits, no collapse. Moscow never experiences the humiliation of the 1990s. Instead, it becomes a strange hybrid capital. There are some Western brands, but they must partner with state firms. There is internet, but it is monitored. There are elections, but the outcomes are managed. The Federation learns from China. It adopts market mechanisms without surrendering political control. It becomes what scholars will later call authoritarian capitalism, decades before the term is coined. And it works. Not perfectly, not freely, but it works. In this timeline, the European Union develops differently. Without the collapse of the Soviet Union, there is no eastern expansion. Poland remains in the Federation's sphere. Hungary remains cautious. Germany reunifies but stays more neutral. France and Britain grow closer to America, but continental Europe hedges its bets. The euro is still created, but fewer nations adopt it. The European project is smaller, richer, and more afraid. Brussels builds relationships with Moscow because there is no other choice. Trade continues. Gas flows. The West needs energy and the Federation has it. A strange coexistence emerges. Not peace, not war. Something in between. The world learns to live with two giants again. Technology evolves along a different path. The internet expands, but it fractures. The Federation builds its own network separate from the American-dominated web. By 2010, there are effectively two internets, the Western net and the Eastern net. They connect at controlled points, but they are not the same. Social media develops differently. There is no single Facebook or Twitter. Instead, there are regional platforms. Information flows more slowly. Censorship is easier. The digital revolution still happens, but it is contained. In the Federation, people use computers and smartphones, but the state always watches. Privacy becomes a Western luxury. In the East, surveillance is simply normal. The tech giants of Silicon Valley never achieve global dominance because half the world is closed to them. Apple and Microsoft compete with Yandex and Kaspersky. The digital Cold War mirrors the physical one. The 2008 financial crisis hits differently. In our timeline, it proved the fragility of American capitalism. In this timeline, it proves the resilience of state control. The Federation's banks are government-owned. They do not collapse. There are no bailouts because there is no need. While Wall Street burns, Moscow stays stable. The crisis becomes a propaganda victory. The Federation's media shows images of American homeless camps and shuttered factories. It asks a simple question. Which system truly protects its people? The question resonates. In Europe, left-wing parties gain ground. In America, there is soul-searching. The unipolar moment that never quite happened feels even more distant. The world realizes that maybe liberal capitalism is not inevitable after all. Maybe there are other paths. Maybe the Federation's way is not dying. Maybe it is evolving. By 2015, the Federation is a major power again. It has intervened in regional conflicts. It has rebuilt its military. It has cultivated allies in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. But it has not invaded anyone. There is no Ukraine war because Ukraine never left. There is no Georgian conflict because Georgia never tried. The Federation's borders are secure because they never broke. Instead of projecting force outward, it consolidates inward. It invests in infrastructure. It builds high-speed rail across Siberia. It develops Arctic ports. It becomes a logistics superpower connecting Europe and Asia. The Belt and Road initiative that China launches in our timeline has competition. The Federation offers an alternative, a northern route, a Slavic route, and nations listen. Daily life inside the Federation is complicated. In Moscow and St. Petersburg, there is a middle class. People have apartments, cars, vacations. They watch movies. They use smartphones. They live relatively comfortable lives, as long as they do not challenge the system. In smaller cities, life is harder. Factories run on old models. Corruption is routine. But there is no collapse. No hyperinflation, no lost decade. People remember the stories their parents told about the chaos in the West's timeline, and they feel lucky. They do not have freedom as the West defines it, but they have stability. They have jobs. They have a sense that their country is strong. The propaganda works because it is mixed with truth. The Federation is not paradise, but it is not hell. It is simply a different way of being. In the West, there is frustration. NATO is still large, but it has no clear mission. The war on terror still happens, but the Federation does not cooperate as much as Russia did in our timeline. Afghanistan becomes even more complicated. Iraq is questioned more heavily. Without the unipolar moment, America cannot act as freely. Every intervention is contested. Every military action is debated. The Federation votes against America in the United Nations and has the weight to matter. The Security Council becomes a real battleground again. The world is multipolar, and that means everything is slower, harder, more negotiated. Some see this as a check on American power. Others see it as paralysis. Both are right. Then comes the twist. By 2020, the Federation faces a crisis it cannot control, not from outside, from within. The generation born after 1991 has grown up in a stable state, but they have seen the world online. They have used VPNs. They have watched Western movies. They have talked to friends in Europe. They want more. Not revolution, not collapse, but change. They want real elections. They want less corruption. They want a say. Protests begin in Moscow, then in Kiev, then in Almaty. They are not violent. They are not organized by the West. They are simply young people asking for a voice. The Federation's leaders face a choice: crush the protests and risk everything, or bend and risk losing control. They choose a middle path. They allow some reforms, they permit more criticism. They open the system slightly, but they do not let go. The protests fade, the system adapts, and the Federation survives again. It always survives. By 2025, the world is different in 1,000 small ways. There is no TikTok. There is no global Amazon. There are 2 space programs competing to return to the moon. There are 2 models of governance competing for influence. The West is freer but more chaotic. The East is stable but more controlled, and billions of people live in the space between wondering which path is better. The Cold War never ended. It simply became digital, economic, cultural. The Berlin Wall is gone, but a new wall exists in the space between networks, systems, and ideologies. And no one knows if it will ever come down. In this strange present, the question is not who won, because no one won. The question is, what was lost? In our timeline, the Soviet collapse brought freedom to millions. It also brought chaos, poverty, and war. In this timeline, the survival brought stability to millions. It also brought stagnation, control, and fear. History does not have good endings or bad endings. It only has consequences. The Soviet Union did not fall because one man made a different choice. And the world that emerged is not better or worse. It is simply different, a reminder that the future is never inevitable, that every decision carries a weight we cannot measure, that the fall of empires is not destiny, that survival is always possible, and that the world we live in is only one of infinite paths that history could have taken on a cold December night in a forest where 3 men almost dissolved a superpower, but chose instead to let it live.